Hello everybody, welcome to episode 21 of Shonen Shorts, where today we'll be going over the June 28th issue of Weekly Shonen Jump. Now this one will be substantially longer than the other ones because there was a Hunter x Hunter chapter that released this week, and there's always a lot to discuss with those. So so it'll be a little bit longer, so I apologize about that, but still it is all there. So there's a lot of stuff. I went over 4 series in this video. So this week, I read I believe it's like the 21st, 22nd chapter of Underdoctor, the 3rd chapter of Hall Formula, and the second chapter of Cannon Master, and then the 411th chapter of Hunter x Hunter. So with Underdoctor, we get a bit of a brief backstory into Dan, who was the imposter for the Underdoctor. And we see it, in fact, when he was a young kid, he was a bit of a nerd. He liked reading. And so we see then as Charlie and her brother Ludo actually came up to him and started playing with him and all that, gave him some friends. But in this time, we see that while they were playing, at one point, Ludo got hit by some stray logs or something like that and ended up dying. But Charlie never really blamed Dan for that. And so we see as they kind of go about, ultimately Dan becomes steadfast on the idea of becoming a doctor. So then we end up going back to the modern day where we see as Haji's agreeing to be Dan's assistant. And we also learn that what Charlie is suffering from is a heart valve something caused from a rheumatic fever. And so, obviously, Haji's going to have to go in and do surgery. And we also get to see the condition in which Haji agreed to do surgery. It was that Dan would never be a doctor or never fake being a doctor again, and that he would go about his way and leave the village for a time. So we see that, ultimately, as Dan, in fact, agrees to it. He's like, well, I already haven't seen Charlie for 10 years, so what's another as long as she lives? So we then see as they go into surgery and all of that, and ultimately get to healing up Charlie. Then afterwards, obviously, Charlie's fine, and we see as Dan prepares to leave, but he leaves Charlie behind a note. He's like, yeah, I was a false doctor, but I'm going to leave and become a new doctor. Because we see as Shu Li and Haji end up talking with Dan before he leaves, and they're like, yeah, no matter how old you are, you can still become a doctor. And Shu Li's like, man, I started learning when I was 16, so you can most certainly do it yourself. So see that play out. We see as Charlie kind of comes to terms with this, but she's like, I waited 10 years, so what's another 10? And she ultimately ends up thanking Haji and all of that. And she was like, I'll remember this forever. And Haji was like, well, try not to, because if you do, someone might try and imposter me. So, But I guess I don't really get the point of the story because it didn't really follow the arc with Asclepius and all of that. But I guess maybe it's just a little bit of an intercession while we watch as the plot develops later on. Because maybe the author didn't have, or Tanemoto, I believe that's his name, or him or her name, his or her name. Because it's possibly that they had a little bit of a writer's block or something like that. So then on to Hall Formula, we see that Miharu ended up placing 3rd in this race because he did lose some time turning corners because he was simply unable to pull the whole weight of the wheel because apparently it was like a 10 kilogram resistance behind it. So he did end up placing 3rd, and we see how he talks about how he is glad that he placed 3rd, that he's up on the podium, but it still hurts. This recent win has retaught him the feeling of what it feels like to lose. And so, after this, we see as he starts going about preparing to leave, and then ultimately Kyogoku, or Matsuba, ultimately ends up coming to him. He's like, yo, you want me to drive home with you? And ultimately they're like, yeah. So we see as Miharu and Haruka end up driving home with Kyogoku. And in this drive, we see as Kyogoku starts speaking with Miharu and describing about what exactly he's going through and about how he has learned to fit the red zone thing and all that, explaining how once you reach this, state where you go past the brink of death and you essentially lock in. That's really what Miharu did, is he locked in. And he's narrowed his distance from the walls on the track from what is usually the size of a yoga ball to a marble. And so we see how Kyogoku mentioned about how this is the mindset of top racers, and he mentioned about how this is the mindset he has as well. Then we see as he goes briefly into discussing about the money and stuff like that, about how once they get actually on their way back to the house. And we see as he discusses about how W3 racers do make a livable income, so Miharu and Haruka would not have to, Miharu wouldn't have to work anymore because Haruka's 4. But, so he mentions about how Miharu needs to get into W3 from WF4, WF, not just W, to essentially make a living income off of his racing. And ultimately, he ends up giving an ultimatum. He's like, all right, this isn't the ultimatum yet, but he's like, if you do keep doing good, I'll get you in cahoots with big people. I can get you a patron or something like that. And we also see then as he gives him an ultimatum, he's like, okay, since we have the same thing, since we are equally, determined in our desire to win, I will become your mentor, but you have to get to WF3. And if you don't, well, it's not necessarily to get to WF3, but he's like, you have to win this next race at Oita. And he's like, it is the perfect course for you. So if you win it, I will become your mentor and I will teach you how to get stronger and get better at controlling the wheel in a proper way and to take advantage of this red zone technique. And ultimately, we kind of see as Miharu then becomes determined to win and for the Haru Spring to arise. But yeah, so then we go on to Cannon Master, and we see as Urd is training a little bit, and we see also as Baharat is like speaking, and he's like, I really don't know how to go about training Urd. But then we see as Urd mentions to Baharat that there was an emissary coming in from a big city in the west that they need your help to destroy a regolith, and I already recruited you up for it. And then Bahara mentions about how, our commissions with Haishira, which is the town that offended prior, and he's like, don't worry about it. Well, Ur's like, don't worry about it. I'll pay the commission fee, or not the commission fee, but the break of commission fee, break of contract, whatever you want to call it, if you end up going and doing this. So we see that they end up going to the city of Napruk, which is one of the 3 great cities in the west. Also, I forgot to mention, but in the beginning of this chapter, it's not really important, but we see that the regoliths had previously been piloted mechs, like in Breath of the Wild, and they were built by the demons during the Great War so that they could be piloted as not autonomous, but robot mechs. But then they ultimately did become autonomous and started wreaking havoc throughout the land after the Great War. But yeah, so we see as they ultimately end up going to Napruk, where they meet up with the big chieftain dude, and he ends up telling them that, this town of Tawat is being attacked by a regolith, and I need you to defend the town without destroying any of the houses and stuff like that, because I don't want to give the people of Tawat empty wasteland. He's like, I'm going to slime myself out if I end up doing this, or humble myself, it was something like that. But yeah, so ultimately they end up going, and we see as Baharat doesn't allow Ur to really be on the front lines here, because he's like, your power is too destructive, so if you use it, then these houses will be destroyed. So we see as Baharat ends up going against the regolith first. We see that the regolith uses secondary cannons, which looks like it's going to be pretty bad for Ur and Baharat, but Baharat ultimately ends up using I believe it's called Song of the Wind Tempest, and it ends up wrapping all these which we call secondary cannon blast into a whirl, like a swirl of some sort, and then it launches it back at the regolith, but it ultimately breaks its shield. And Baharat came to this conclusion because he noticed that Ur was able to essentially produce the same thing as a regolith blast, and so he's like, okay, if a regolith blast can break through the shield, then I can use this to break through its shield. So he ends up breaking through its shield, but he's unable to hit the core. So we see then as Baharat talks to Ur, and he's like, we're not going to be able to do this. We need to go get a higher level Slaylith, and we need to get out of here, because we're not going to be able to do it without destroying some of this city. And ultimately we see as the chief dude, because he came along with him to make sure that they didn't cause any damage, and he was a previous Slaylith as well. He had stopped being a Slaylith, I believe it said a half year ago, or a year and a half, something like that. And so we see as he mentions about how he did know that there were some crazy complications possibly to rise, but he didn't know it would be anything like this. And he is very astonished by Baharat's reaction to this cannon fire, because he's like, most Slavics would usually just dodge that, but Baharat reflected it essentially, and so, or parried it. And so then we see as Ur is ultimately like, no, I got this, I can do it. And that's really where the chapter ends. So on to the Hunter x Hunter chapter. Now, this is a lot of complex stuff. You need to read Hunter x Hunter for yourself if you want to get the most out of it, because really, it's like a light novel. I'd honestly prefer if the Secession Battle Arc was a novel, because it's a lot of writing and not drawing and stuff. It is drawing as well, but the predominant, portion of it is in writing. So we see as Hulkenberg, the Ninth Prince's funeral is planned to occur, and then we get to see as Sarahel, who is one of the have-nots of Second Prince Camilla, is planning to assassinate Wobble with her Nen curse. And so then we see as Kurapika and gang, we get to see Melody and gang speak about how Fugetsu needs some rest and stuff like that, about how she is getting a bit fatigued, but ultimately she will be able to recuperate and do fine by herself. Not by herself, but with their assistance. And so then we end up going to Kurapika and gang, where we see as he's preparing to teach the second session of classes, where he introduces that he's going to in fact be dividing the classes into 2, with 9 going to I believe it was 9 to a beginner and 9 to an intermediate, and it was 9 to an introduction class and 9 to a beginner class. And the beginners were going to be taught very high level Nen within a month, while the introduction class got 2 weeks just to kind of learn the basics of Nen. So we see this, and we see as everyone else kind of starts scheming, talking about what they wanted to do and all of that. And we see, I believe it was someone from, it was from one of the Zhang Li's defenders or personal guard who ultimately wants to be in the introductory class, which I don't know why that was so important, but he ultimately decides to go to that, and we don't really get to see a division into the groups yet. We see as Kurapika like instructs them how to decide on which group to go to, but we don't actually see the division of the groups yet. And we see though as Kurapika is also offering to allow one more person from each of the prince's entourages, and he's predominantly doing this because he wants to build a defensive equilibrium within the succession battle. Because if he gives everyone equal powers, then there won't be much striking out of each other, because even if they do strike out, it'll be a stalemate. So this is something to essentially prolong the succession battle, so Wobble has the longest chance of survival. But yeah, so then we see as this continues to play out, and with this, we ultimately end up getting a description of why the succession battle is going on. We kind of get another breakdown of what it's going to be used for, how it's going to be used to decide the next king of Kakin. And with this, we see as Kurapika goes into a little bit more detail about why specifically the battle is happening. So we see as what Kakin is ruled off of, how they maintain their immense control, their authoritarian control, is that they have the succession battle so that a prayer can be made to the gods, then they make, it's essentially like a nin vow in a way. And so the princes who make nin vows can be used. They try to get each one to make a nin vow and to get their own nin beast so that they can be used for this process. So make a prayer to our gods and ultimately kill off all of the others for the succession battle, then sacrifice them to the gods to act as a nin engine, essentially, or a nin producer, nin factory, so that the power of Kakin can then be maintained through the dictator, or the new dictator, the new authoritarian leader. So, with this, we now know that the reason why, like, the succession battle is going on, because I don't know if we've seen this prior. It's been a moment since I caught up on Hunter x Hunter, but yeah, so this is, I presume, new information. But then after this, we see as Kurapika's like, all right, I got one last thing to announce. 14th Prince Wobble is excluded from the succession battle. So this raises some questions. Now, we can presume that it's possibly because, Wobble is the grandchild of Netero, but that's unlikely. So our next conclusion is that Wobble is in fact not a member of the succession battle because she does not have a nin beast. Therefore, she cannot be used as a part of the nin engine. It would be pointless to kill this child because she would give no benefit to the gods. It'd kind of be like an insulting sacrifice because she would do nothing. So there's no point in sacrificing Wobble because Wobble doesn't have nin. Wobble can't make a nin vow. So there's nothing really for them to be used for, therefore they have no reason to be within the succession battle. So Kurapika has discovered now that he can exclude Wobble and continue to defend Wobble until the Dark Continent is reached without Wobble having to die. So that's all there really was for the Hunter x Hunter chapter. I'm really ready to see where this goes. I'm really ready to see what we get with the next 10 chapters because I was really excited for this. I know I used really 8,000 times there, but it is just very exciting for multiple years. I know I haven't been a Hunter x Hunter fan this entire hiatus time, but it is very exciting to see as people start getting back into Hunter x Hunter and seeing as it is revived once more. So I'm really ready to see what comes with this and how it goes on. But yeah, that's all there really was for episode 21 of Shonen Shorts, and all there really was for the June 28th issue of Weekly Shonen Jump. So thank you very much for watching.